to come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I bought a dog that killed the calf, that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello, and welcome back to the Dana Gould Hour podcast. Summer is in high dudgeon. The news is a roller coaster. The asphalt is too hot for the dog to walk on, and all the good drive-ins are 2 hours away. That's the reality I'm struggling with. I'm trying to adapt, and I assume that you are too, and so I offer this high summer audio oasis. Comedian Drew Landry is here. Drew is one of my favorite comedians here in Los Angeles. He's a buddy, he's super funny, and he has a new special out called All My Friends Are Dead. Drew started doing stand-up at 13, which means that even though he's only 30 years old, he's already a worn-out, tired has-been. No. Comedian Drew Landry, coming at you. Additionally, now you've probably heard of the Criterion Collection, that high-end library of our cinematic heritage. But have you heard of Vinegar Syndrome? Vinegar Syndrome is basically the Criterion Collection for exploitation films and drive-in movie fare. They are archivists, film restoration experts, and curators of our rich exploitation cinema heritage. They have a new box set out called The Lost Picture Show, which features titles like The Las Vegas Strangler, Violated, and The Sex Serum of Dr. Blake, also known as Voodoo Heartbeat. From Vinegar Syndrome, Dino, Proserpio, and Oscar Becher are here. True Tales from Weirdsville takes an unflinching look at a movie you may not have seen, but you have definitely heard of. Caligula! Starring Malcolm McDowell, Helen Mirren, Peter O'Toole, and Sir John Gielgud. What's the one thing that all of these actors have in common? They all wish they weren't in Caligula. Find out why. Me? Where am I gonna be? Well, on Saturday, August 10th, I will be in Seattle at the Triple Door. And on Friday, August 16th, for one show only, I will be in beautiful Irvine, California at the world-famous Improv. September 5th through the 8th, I will be at one of my favorite clubs on the planet, the Acme Comedy Club in beautiful Minneapolis, Minnesota. My good friend Dr. Z will be performing live at GalaxyCon in Raleigh, North Carolina on July 27th, and in Tarrytown, New York at the Sleepy Hollow Film Festival in a special live show with Mystery Science Theater's Joel Hodgson on October 10th, the Sleepy Hollow Film Festival. All this and so much more. Go to the live shows page at danagould.com for details. As always, as we like to remind you, this show is brought to you by you. If you enjoy it, please consider becoming a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. Go to danagould.com, sign up for our Patreon, and for $5 a month, you get some junk. And now, it's on to our filthy business.
Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour podcast.
The Dana Gould Hour. Free and worth it.
It's a beautiful sun-dappled day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in Southern California. Summer starts gray and murky. It's a thing, and I've been out here forever, and I forget it every year. It's called June Gloom. And what it means is it's gray and overcast until about 1 to 2 in the afternoon. And then it burns off and it's fine. And yesterday was the first day you woke up to a blue sky and it was hot. And it's already hot as balls. And how do I know that summer has started? Friend of the podcast, Ken Daly, yesterday saw the first Halloween decorations up in a store. That's how you know it's the beginning of summer here in Southern California. But that's why I live here. Now, speaking of June Gloom, my guest today has a comedy special with sort of a dark title, but which made it appeal to me. But it's brilliantly funny. He's a really good friend of mine. Full disclosure. The special is called All My Friends Are Dead. And the comedian is Drew Landry. Hello, Drew.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And it's also, we should say, you can see the special on, is it on YouTube? Did you post it?
Yeah, it's on YouTube.
And it's an album. It's an album on Comedy Dynamics that you can download.
Mm-hmm.
It's great. And I'm not blowing smoke up your ass because I can't listen to a ton of comedy. And actually, like, I was at the taping of this, so, you know, I was familiar with it, but it's really great. My favorite thing is Mary Landry lying to people about the government. We'll get into that.
Spoiler alert.
What I liked about it, what appealed to me, and narcissistically, because it reminded me of myself, is that you've got some hot problems that you talk about and some things that aren't like typical stand-up comedy fodder. And you go there, but it's not dark. It's not morose. Like you figured it out right out of the gate that you can talk about anything. It's how you talk about it. And the tone of the show. But what made you started off in Baltimore?
Yes.
Okay. And that's why you sound like Marshall Mathers when you talk?
That's exactly why. Then I think I just listened to too much Marshall Mathers and it just went into my brain.
Well, that's it actually, now that I have you, just now for the sake of for my own edification, can you give me a 60-second breakdown of the Drake? What's the
Drake and Kendrick?
Yeah, the Drake and Kendrick imbroglio.
Yeah. So here's the log line. Here's the footnotes. So basically, they had been subtly dissing each other, but not saying each other's names for the most part for like 10 years. And then this year, long story short, they started really dissing each other. And essentially, there have been rumors for years of Drake being a pedophile, and Kendrick mentioned them in songs and kind of seemingly destroyed Drake. Because now there's this song, Not Like Us, about Drake being a pedophile. And I mean, it's like playing at fucking bar mitzvahs. It's like
is
unescapable.
Is that They're Not Like Us?
Yes, they're not like us.
It's called?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I'm not familiar. I'm not overly familiar with either one. But it seems from what I understand that Drake is grossly outmatched.
Oh, severely. And yeah. I think Drake is talented, but it just, I mean, it's insane to see what Kendrick did to him. It's insane. And yeah. I mean, there have been plenty of times where something happens to an entertainer and I'm like, they don't come back from this, and they totally do. So obviously there's a high chance he'll come back from this. But I feel like there's a difference between being called a pedophile and being called a pedophile in a super catchy song that's playing.
Yeah, this will follow Drake like Richard Gere's gerbil.
Yeah, exactly. It's always going to be an asterisk. And it's funny because these rumors have existed for years. And for a long time, I had a OVO shirt, and OVO is Drake's label. The icon is like this owl. And I've been posting a lot of jokes, you know, just making fun of Drake and making fun of the whole situation. And his fans are going through my Instagram and finding a picture of me with a Drake shirt and like posting it like it's a picture with Ghislaine Maxwell. Like, is this you? Like, it's this damning, embarrassing. Like, I can't escape this picture now.
How dare you own that? You know, that shirt is tacit.
Yeah, I burned it.
Yeah, it's basically genocide. You love genocide. You own a Drake shirt.
Yeah, that's the thing to take away from this.
It's so insane. But don't they also, and then we'll move on, but don't they also in that music world, they don't even occupy the same kind of world. Like Drake isn't in the same genre so much as Kendrick Lamar, isn't he? Drake seems a lot more mom and dad friendly.
Drake is very pop, but he can really rap his ass off when he wants to. And Kendrick can rap his ass off, but he can make pop songs if he wants to. And this song,
Okay.
Not Like Us, was kind of him proving like, I can diss you and call you a fucking pedophile and also make it a catchy pop song. So I can do what you do while calling you a predator.
It's brutal.
It's brutal. And honestly, it's very funny. Like it's just
hilarious.
Really entertaining to watch.
That's what I mean. It's so well done and so funny. And that A minor is like, oh, that's classic joke.
Well, when the feud started, everyone was kind of on pins and needles. Like, is Kendrick going to call him a pedophile? Is this what's going to like?
Is he really, or does he just have inappropriate friendships?
I have no idea. It's just their rumor. So there's the Millie Bobby Brown thing,
right?
Like
and they were friends.
They were friends when
which
he was
is weird.
Which is weird when she was like 15 and she was saying like, yeah, I'll text him about boys and he'll give me advice. And it's like, what are you going to talk to? But there's that. And there's this old video of him from like 10 years ago dancing with a 17-year-old girl on stage and kissing her. And he's like, how old are you? And she's like 17. And the crowd's like, oh, and then he keeps grinding on her and kissing her.
There you go.
And there's a few others. So it's like, it's been breadcrumbs for the past 10 years. And I think everyone's been waiting to see if it's all rumors or if there's going to be some kind of reckoning.
It's so funny because like you used to have songs like Thank Heaven for Little Girls and things like it seems like only recently, like in the past couple of years, humanity in general went, maybe dating underage girls is bad.
Yeah. Well, I remember years ago when I watched the Woody Allen documentary, they talk about Manhattan and it's an objectively good movie, but that movie was a classic for like 50 years. And then all of us at the same time were like, wait, this is horrifying.
Oh, yeah, I know. It's funny because that's exactly right. Manhattan specifically, which is a visually beautiful movie. And there's a couple of things in that movie that are so fucked up that no one caught at the time. There's another scene in that movie where, he's dating Mariel Hemingway, who's a high school student in the movie. There's a scene where he's lying on a couch recording his diary or whatever, and it's so pretentious. It's nauseating. He's talking about the things that make life worth living, and one of them is Those Pears by Cezanne. Fuck off. But he doesn't mention his son. He has his character has a son, and he doesn't mention his kid and the things that make life worth living.
It doesn't even crack the top 10.
No, it doesn't make it in. It's a solid backseat to Those Pears by Cezanne.
No, that movie, it's like his If I Did It. It's just littered with clues.
That's so funny. Now, have you seen As a Daddy I Love You? Is that the one?
Oh, the Louis C.K. movie?
Yeah, the one that they went like
it got canceled, but it leaked online. It's out there.
A friend of mine saw it and said, I'm sitting there thinking, you're recording this.
No, I remember I watched it online when it leaked out of curiosity.
Oh, you did see it?
Yes, and I mean, this might be an objectively good movie, but it wasn't even a good movie. That movie is horrifying.
Yeah, you can't always be great.
It makes Manhattan look subtle.
Yeah, that's what I understand, and it's also like it's unfair. Like you condemn Louis, and I've known Louis. I think he's brilliant, and have difficulty with what he did. But I don't think he did anything Chuck Berry didn't do.
Oh yeah, it's just
or James Brown, it's a different lens, and you can't go back. John Lennon I don't know if he ever but he was a very violent guy. He early before the Beatles broke, he beat the fuck out of a guy, and I think fucked him up for life. It's there are it's just a different world, and you can't go back and just yank art out. It's like I think that Bill Cosby's comedy is important.
Yeah. Oh, it's the eternal question separating the art from the artist. But you can't.
Hitler, great painter,
amazing painter. I'm not a fan of his hobbies.
Yeah,
but
the pears by Hitler are so much better than the pears by Cezanne.
I've been on a Hitchcock binge, and if Hitchcock
again, super fucked up dude. Yeah, day 3 of pelting Tippi Hedren with crows.
Oh yeah, and it's just weird. Where it's like if you, and once again, I think so many of these people are bastards, but you can't throw their art away. And it's like there's this cutoff where if they died decades ago, you can't. But if Hitchcock was alive today, there'd be a stigma with watching his movies. And
I think you're right. Yeah,
it's interesting how society changes, and probably in a good way.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, it moves. It moves in a positive. And there's the political world, and then there's the social world, and they move at very different speeds.
Well, and I've thought about if Bill Cosby died a year before that stuff came out, he probably would have went down in history as a great man. We probably would have never talked about it or found out.
Well, are you the one that does the joke about Hugh Hefner?
Yes.
What is that joking?
Hugh Hefner died a month before the Me Too movement. Does anyone else find that suspicious? And I was thinking earlier, if you remember when we were at JFL Vancouver and I was writing my set list, I had never left America, and we were in Canada, which is obviously it's like diet America. But
it's radically different.
But I said to you, I was gonna maybe do that joke, and I was like, "Do they know who Hugh Hefner is here?" And you're like, "Drew, we're 2 hours away from Seattle."
My friend Dave Higgins was shooting a movie in Seattle, a really brilliant movie called The Wrong Guy. And this was back in I might have even been in the 90s or the early aughts. I think it was in the 90s. And they would be driven to the set, and Dave would get in the car and go, car, set. And they go, oh, you don't have that here. I'm sorry. Just never mind. No, it is weird. I mean, I am waiting for the book about the last year or 2 years of the Playboy Mansion. That's got to Great Expectations with Viagra. Just this Baroque, Gothic.
Well, I haven't seen it, but there was a documentary about Hugh Hefner in the Playboy Mansion, like a Me Too documentary that came out a year or two ago. And I read this article, it was like the 10 most shocking moments from the Hugh Hefner documentary. And one of them was he jerked off a dog or something.
Oh, gee.
And it's so twisted, but how are you going to put something that hilarious in the middle of this horrifying? It's so weird how it's this heinous crime that's also very cartoonish.
He must have been a very good boy, whatever he did.
He was an animal lover. Would you rather he abuse dogs or make them happy?
Well, it's this thing. Sometimes when they have doggy Prozac now, and you just want to make sure that even if he's on Prozac, that everything will still work. When my first wife was in the hospital for something, and I went to visit, she's there for 2 days, and there's this weird guy across the hall with a toupee on that was so bad I didn't realize what it was at first. It was so it was way too much hair for him at that age, and it was on at a forward canted angle. It looked like a wedding cake hat. And it was Bob Guccione, the publisher of Penthouse magazine. And I was like, oh, really? My. Yeah. And he was walking up and down the hall on a walker. And it was just oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Yeah. And it's who do you think you're fooling? Do people, do you think people are wow, that old man has an amazing head of hair that's totally real?
No one knows. No one knows. Yeah. I do wonder I think the way to do it is the Sean Connery, he would wear it when he had to wear it at work, and then he would take it off.
Mm-hmm. Do you watch I Think You Should Leave?
Yeah, I have. I've seen some of it.
Did you see the sketch where it was an ad for men that wear toupees, but they're sick of it, but they don't want to just immediately become bald? So it's a service that sends you increasingly smaller toupees. you can go bald in front of your friends.
That's fucking
Yeah.
Jason Alexander told me that like he did try wearing a toupee for a year, and people were like, Jason, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, dude, we know you.
But Shatner saw him and went, looking good. That's not a joke. That's not a joke.
Oh,
That's
I believe
real.
you. Yeah, that's
looking
really
good.
funny.
I have to say, I see Shatner a lot because he's in the neighborhood, and he looks so much better. He looks great for 93. He looks amazing, and he looks better in person than on TV.
Really?
Yeah, like he looks really good in person, and whatever that system is, it's totally fine.
And it seems like he's there mentally, right?
Totally. Yeah, no, he's just, and one of the, I mean, he still does conventions and things. And the reason he does them is like, yeah, I got to keep working. I got to keep moving or, you know,
or I'll die.
Yeah, I'm interested. Well, this was funny. This will get us into your special. I'm interested to see what will happen with my father because my mother passed. And now, you know, my dad is 90, same age as Shatner. And his whole thing was going to visit my mom every day in the facility where she lived, nursing home, not prison. And and now that he doesn't do that, I'm interested. And the other thing that he does do, which is I can't go near this for the my mom's remains are in a what's called a duplex urn, which is a cremation urn with 2 chambers. The other chamber will be for him.
Huh.
And it's on the mantelpiece. And he sits there on the couch and goes from the TV to that and back to the TV and looks. And it's the most Edgar Allan Poe. You know, one day they'll put my body in there. Would you like to watch Shark Week?
I mean, there's something very beautiful and poetic about that.
I'm afraid that my brother will just try to stuff him in without even waiting.
How do people do this? Doesn't fit. Do you like roll him? What do you?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't want anybody. I don't want anyone's remains in the house. They don't.
I feel the same way. I don't judge people that have a loved one's remains in their house at all, but I could never. Something about it just, I wouldn't like it.
I find the whole idea of burial insane. I was for the, you know, I grew up, I've talked about this before. I grew up on Cemetery Street. That was my childhood address. And it was the street and it ended in the gates of the town cemetery. And we played in the cemetery more often than the park because the cemetery was at the corner. And that's where I learned how to ride a bike. That's where we would play Army. That's where we would play hide and go seek. That's where, you know, it's you know, we went down the cemetery. And, but I'd never seen a coffin like lowered into and I just did a year ago at my wife's grandmother or something. And there's a giant cement box, and then you put the casket in the box, and then they put the cement lid on the casket, and then they bury it. And I'm just like, I'm not going in that, dead or alive. I'm not doing that. But the whole thing is like, and then what? Okay, we're never going to need this again. You know, as Steve Agee says, do you ever realize that underground we're just surrounded by skeletons wearing suits?
That's so true.
It's so true.
Well, I have this really, really, really weird irrational fear of the idea of being buried, where my brain goes, what if there's a tiny, 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 less than 1% chance that when you're dead, your brain is still working?
Oh,
and you're just
I
there.
hear you. Oh, I hear you.
And then you're buried and you're just awake in a way forever. And it's this weird fear that I'll have sometimes.
I have that specific fear.
I want to be cremated just in case.
Yep. I'm the same exact way. I could not be more on point with that. Yeah. Or like 72 hours after you die, you come back. Like,
what? Where am I?
Yeah. What the fuck? Yeah. No, I just, you know, and that's the thing. And I've said this to my kids, like you can't leave your family without a plan.
Mhm.
And I want my remains scattered by the Mulholland Lookout, but I don't want to be cremated. I want to stay a source of excitement. Which brings us to your special, All My Friends Are Dead, available on Comedy Dynamics. Your best friend died when you were
8.
8. He was also 8.
Yeah. He was 42.
But it was in an elevator, correct?
Yes,
So he was with an adult.
He was with his family. They were on vacation in a hotel, and they had this, I guess, old elevator, and he was crushed to death by the elevator. Which is great fodder for comedy.
Oh.
Yeah.
And how is his family?
I mean, so they sued the elevator company. I don't want to get too into it because it's not my story to tell, but obviously it was excruciating for them. And then, and the special is about him, and his twin sister Ellie was my other best friend up until 2021, and that's when she passed. And that was his sister. That was his twin sister. Yeah, and we kind of, because I was her only friend that she had for that long that also knew her brother. So it was very much like a sibling relationship between us. So the special and the album is kind of about that whole saga.
Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, it is funny.
Well, my goal was I wanted to make sure that it didn't necessarily feel like a one-man show. Like, it doesn't, which is great.
Yeah,
how can I do this without, getting... I didn't want a part where I get real for 2 minutes.
No, you don't. And it's really the great things, because the things you talk about are on the wavelength or the bandwidth of stand-up comedy. You don't get creepy about it, which I think would be... I wouldn't want to see that one-man show, because I don't think there's a heavy lesson to be learned from that people don't instinctively know already.
Yeah.
It's kind of like talking about how much you love the Pears by Cezanne. Yeah. There's a word for that. It rhymes with blasterblation. And it's so funny, but I didn't realize that Ellie was his sister. So I imagine that the both of you sort of were haunted by that, especially if it was a twin.
Oh, absolutely. And she was, obviously I wasn't there. She was there. And
yeah, I
can't even begin to fathom. And
that's not a
And the thing is,
reality.
She was just the kindest person I've ever met. So whenever someone is an asshole and people go like, they've been through a lot. It's like, well, I know someone that watched their twin brother get decapitated, and they were the nicest person I knew. So I don't like excuses. Wow. Yeah. Insane story.
Yeah. Insane. Truly bananas. And you tell a really funny story about, how old was she when she passed?
How old was she?
Yeah.
She was 28.
Okay. And so she lived to adulthood. She sort of processed that, but it seems like she never really I don't think you can ever get past it.
Exactly.
You just sort of find a way to incorporate it into, Ellie 2.0. And how did she pass away?
Through alcohol poisoning.
Okay. So she basically, you make a joke about it, but it's Final Destination.
It is.
It really is. It's like, I missed my bus. I've got to get.
Yeah. It's just, it was all, the whole thing is just horrifying.
Yeah. Wow. And the parents?
The parents, they're
happiest people in the world.
No, the parents, that family, they have 2 other kids, and they are the strongest people I've ever met. They are like superheroes with how, they have to be. but we're close with their family. I got their blessing before I did the special.
Of course, yeah.
And I don't know if all of that, I don't want to send them the special, like, check it out, it's really funny, but
it's so funny.
I'm very close with their
They didn't die in vain. Look how funny this special is.
I'm very close with their other sister, and I got her blessing, and I knew she would watch it, and I was terrified of her watching it, but she ended up liking it a lot. And the Final Destination joke, that was the one I was most worried about. Like, all the material about what happened to Tucker, that was the one I was most worried about offending the family, and then that ended up being her favorite joke.
Sure. Well, I always said this about people that live with that kind of trauma. Like Ted Kennedy, when he was alive, got a lot of shit for being drunk a lot. It's like, yeah, he had.
Wouldn't you be?
He had 4 or 5 siblings that were murdered. Like,
yeah.
His oldest brother was killed in World War II. His next older brother was shot in the head. His other older brother was shot in the head. His sister had a botched brain surgery, and then his other sister died.
It'd be fucked up if he wasn't drunk all the time.
Yeah, it's like, give the guy a fucking break.
Yeah, let the guy have a drink.
Yeah, it's bananas to me. You really cannot underappreciate the weird connections that twins have. It really is a spooky connection that people don't understand.
Oh, totally.
I know the parents of twins, and they had, like, this is not apocryphal. This isn't something I heard on a podcast. This is something I heard from the parent. They had, when the kids were little, like 2, one of the kids had a close call in the pool. Nanny turned her head, kid was in the pool, was in there a bit of time, got him out, everything was fine, but it was a close call. The other twin was not there. The next day, the other twin went to the back door, not knowing what happened, and screamed for his brother to get out of the pool.
Jesus Christ. I think it's something that I don't think a non-twin could ever fully begin to grasp.
Yeah.
It feels borderline supernatural, but I truly believe I truly believe twins do have a connection like that.
Yeah, no, they absolutely do.
So
they absolutely do.
For that to happen to not only your brother, but your twin brother, I can't even begin to comprehend it. I would always, obviously, her and I would talk about Tucker all the time. And I would almost, because obviously, I got PTSD from the situation, but it paled in comparison to hers. It's like, I had amateur PTSD. She had professional.
Yeah.
So
you had JV. Yeah. JV. So, you had JV PTSD.
So I would feel unbelievably guilty when we would talk about it, because I would feel bad being like, yeah, it fucked me up. Because, sure it did, but not on the level it did to her.
Sure.
I wasn't there, wasn't my twin.
Not my twin, not my problem. That was it's truly amazing. Another thing that they go through that you don't think about, I know twins, identical twins. They're just fraternal, I guess it's called. I know identical twins, and one of them said, "Yeah, but when you grow up, you realize that you spend your entire life talking to people who aren't sure you're you."
Yeah, that must be really weird to have an identical twin.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. But the greatest story is Elvis, who had a twin in the womb.
Oh, right. That he absorbed?
He ate him, apparently. No, I don't know what happened. And I forget his name. But his name was Elvisant. He died in the womb, and so you're born with survivor's guilt.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
so insane. It's so nuts. So they haven't seen the special, but they're like, yeah, great, no worries.
I don't know if they've seen the special.
They're back in Baltimore.
Yes, and I know their sister has seen the special. I don't know if the rest of the family has. I haven't asked them to watch it because I just asked if I could.
Sure, no, you don't.
And I was very nervous to ask them, but they were very. I thought they were going to be like, oof, okay, sure, but they were very emphatic and excited about it. But their sister got married last year, and I was supposed to give a speech at the wedding about Ellie, but I got COVID and couldn't go. So I recorded a speech on my phone and sent it to them, and they played it on speakers.
Oh God.
Yeah.
That's so weird. Yeah.
Isn't that so weird?
Yeah, but that's also like COVID helping you out of an awkward situation.
Oh, because I would have been I was nervous in the recording. I'm nervous. And I was recording it alone in my room.
Yeah.
Like my voice skips and
yeah. So
looking at my set list, like, oh, what else? What else?
But I don't know how you. Yeah, it is one of those things that you just sort of incorporated into your life. Like, yeah, this is what I do now. This is who I am. This is who I am now. Do you find that? So it was like Tucker was your best friend.
Yes,
and then Ellie was very close to you.
Yeah. Well,
do you find that other people don't want to get close to you because they fear they'll be next?
I can't remember who, but a comic brought me on stage. He was like, he has a new album called All My Friends Are Dead, and I'm scared because I'm his friend. Give it up for Drew Landry. Yeah, well, I was like that. I'm like that with Bobcat. All of Bobcat's close friends get picked off one by one. I do feel like be careful. You might be next. There's a Final Destination element to that. Yeah. The other really funny thing that you talk about that's kind of like, good for him, is you talk about being diagnosed with bipolar and your mother's attempts to put you at ease. So how old were you when you were diagnosed with bipolar, and how were you diagnosed? I was 18, and I was switching between medications, trying to find the right cocktail. And I think it was Wellbutrin made it way worse. I talked to my psychiatrist about it. And what are the symptoms that you're dealing with? And I say this as somebody who's been on meds since 1990. It's kind of a roller coaster between severe depression and weird mania, and sometimes a mixture of the two. And I think there's bipolar 1 and bipolar 2. I have bipolar 2. I think with bipolar 1, like that's what, like, say Kanye has, where when you have mania, you like think you're a god. You think you can fly. With bipolar 2, when you have mania, you're just really erratic and your brain is going too fast. You're too loud. You can't sleep. So it was a roller coaster between those two things, and then a mixture of those two things. So I was basically just telling my psychiatrist everything. And he was like, yeah, I think you have bipolar disorder. So it was a long conversation where he concluded that essentially. I'm sure that everybody who hears that thinks, oh, that sounds like me. Oh, it's infuriating. Yeah, but it's like, no, you don't understand the level. Yeah, it's not what. Yeah, because I have a joke in my act how a friend of mine was like, don't worry, man, everyone's a little bipolar. And it's like, I get that'd be like if you walked up to someone that was HIV positive, like, hey, everyone has a little bit of AIDS. Yeah, exactly. No, I know somebody that has bipolar 2. Now, granted, I'm lucky in that, I went to a lot of therapy, found the right cocktail of meds. So for the most part, I have it mostly under control, but it's a lot. When I got diagnosed, I was relieved because everything made sense. It was like the end of a movie when the twist happens and you see all the clues. Oh yeah, no, when I been through it myself with panic disorder when they just put it, no, it's this. Yeah, it makes it easier to, I don't know if conquer is the right word, but for lack of a better word, easier to conquer because now you know what you're fighting against. Yeah, I mean, I've told the story 100 times. 1994, I stayed awake for 11 days. And I thought the part of my brain that makes you sleep did not work anymore, and that I was just going to stay awake until I died of exhaustion. And no, and then finally get to the right doctor who goes, no, you have somnambulistic hypervigilance. It's a form of PTSD. Here, take this. And it was literally like he pulled
spear out of my chest. I was like,
oh yeah, it's life changing. It's a relief.
It really is. Like in the, I know the moment. I can pinpoint the moment. And yeah, it's just like you realize that it's just a thing that's wrong with you that can be fixed.
Exactly. It's like a stomach ache. You know, it's a chemical thing. And when you look at it like that, it's a little easier to at least try to make sense of.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah. But what you tell in the special is when you told your mom she was bipolar, what did she do?
In the special, I say she Googled cool celebrities that are bipolar. And she goes, look at all these awesome people that were bipolar. Kurt Cobain, Robin Williams, Anthony Bourdain.
We were talking about earlier, it's like, I wonder people like famous people in history, they probably all had something.
Oh, yeah. Just before it was popular is not the right word, but before we were very conscious about mental health, I'm sure so many.
I'm sure Da Vinci was probably bipolar, and he was just like, we only got the high mania stuff and we didn't really know about him wandering around in a robe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They also say, like, I know in Brian Wilson's case from the Beach Boys that he has schizoaffective disorder. And they say that before the onset of it, your brain literally just has this like burst of crazy genius.
Yeah.
And then, and like that coincided with him, writing, Pet Sounds. It was like, oh, that was his brain like flourishing before the crash.
Well, Kanye would talk about how he's bipolar, and obviously it's sad to see what he's become. It's completely different now, but he would talk about how he didn't want to take meds because a lot of his brilliance would come from his manic stages of bipolar. And it's just this weird kind of just compromise with yourself where it's like, do I want to make this amazing art or be normal? And that's an unhealthy way to look at it, because there are plenty of people that got help and they're talented. Yeah.
I mean, I never thought, I was so, I can only speak for myself, but like so if I go to therapy, will it compromise my art? I was like, no, fuck art.
I also think it's a myth.
And it doesn't. It does, being a more effective communicator doesn't dampen your art.
No, not at all.
Yeah. Does Kanye know that he's no longer Kanye?
I don't think so. It's so sad to watch.
He's just married to a naked woman, from what I know. And that's all I know.
And he like pulled a Vertigo where he's dressing his wife like his ex-wife, and she's getting plastic surgery to live. It's like,
oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I almost see older Kanye and current Kanye as two different people, to the point where I can listen to old Kanye because it doesn't even feel like separating the art from the artist, because it feels like a different dude. He's always been super unwell, but it's just it's on a completely different level at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. To be the weird member of the Kardashians is such an accomplishment.
Yeah. To be the craziest member. To be the member that's so toxic they have to kick you out. Like, you're ruining the Kardashian name.
You have besmirched the great name of Kardashian. I don't know what it is about her. I don't follow it that closely, but it was like Pete Davidson must have been like a cold beer on a hot summer's day. It's like, oh, well, he's fine.
Well, I can't remember who, but someone tweeted, like, let me get this wrong. Kanye thinks Hitler was a good guy, but we shouldn't forgive Pete Davidson.
The special's out. The album is out. Netflix and the Netflixization of show business. I say Netflix like people say Kleenex. It's streaming. And that venue of that platform of community has not only changed like the movie industry and the television industry, it's changed stand-up in the way people do stand-up. How has that affected your sort of generation of comedians? Like, I see a lot of people, for an example, people don't want to post. People have to post every day or every other day. But people don't want to post their material, so they just post crowd work.
Yeah.
And that has resulted in people coming to the shows expecting it to be nothing but crowd work and coming with their set list. Like you'll walk on stage, my uncle has a club foot. Like they want
It's so true. It's that, and you go to so many shows now and it'll just be nonstop crowd work to the point where, and comics aren't paying attention to the other comics. So they're asking the front row all the same questions. Like, are you guys together? It's like, yeah, we just said we're together to the last 5 people.
Right. Yeah.
It's this weird.
I do love lazy crowd work. So what do you do? I'm a pediatric oncologist. What's that? Sucking dick? No.
Well, that's the
helping
issue.
Children that are sick.
I think, well, first off, I think crowd work is a really, really, really impressive skill when you're good at it. I can't do it. I'm bad at crowd work.
I can't do it at all. I can't do it at all. And I'm not I'm not that interested in the well, I don't care what you do for a living, to be honest.
Well, and but good crowd work is so fucking impressive. But the problem is, because crowd work is the trend right now, everyone thinks they can do it. So you see comics that are not good at crowd work. And once again, I'm not good at it, but that's not why I do it. Yeah. And lately, a thing I see a lot in the viral crowd work clips is that they'll ask leading questions that are destined to get outrageous answers. And the humor from the clip doesn't come from a thing the comic says. The humor comes from the audience member giving an outrageous answer and the comic being shocked. So the questions will be like, you got any fetishes? Where it's like, no matter how they answer that, you're gonna be shocked. And they'll be like, what feet? And you'll be like, feet? That's gross, man. And it's like, comic destroys pervert in the front row. And it's like, you asked him. So I think that's a big issue, is it's leading questions. And I know I'm very, very sick of the crowd work.
Have you ever played with your own poop? Well, yeah, you have.
They'll ask someone a question where there's no right answer, where they'll ask a couple, have you guys ever done anal? It's a trap. If they say yes, they're gross. If they say no, they're lame. And I always wonder, so many of these crowd work. Yeah. And so many of these crowd work clips, there's a camera on the people's faces. And it's like, these are people that didn't consent into being in a viral video. Now there's millions of strangers watching them answer if they've had a threesome or not.
That's the worst.
And people, the other thing is,
setting people up.
Yeah. Oh, it's so annoying. Yeah. And once again,
have you ever killed anyone with your car?
No, I don't believe you. Comic destroys vehicular manslaughter committer. Well, and the other thing is, so I see a lot of people blame
comic crushes auto assassin.
I see a lot, and I know this is a loaded name to bring up in front of comics. Comics blame Matt Rife for I think he caused the rise in crowd work, but I don't really. I think he's one of the main catalysts because he blew up from crowd work, but I think he's an interesting case where he blew up from crowd work, but I don't think he was trying to start a trend. And he's amazing at crowd work. And I kind of see Matt Rife as like the Oppenheimer of crowd work, where I like to picture him like the end of Oppenheimer, where he's seeing all the crowd work that's happened and it's just zooming in on his face and he realizes he ruined the world.
Well, it's funny because somebody was talking about Sam Morril, who
genius,
and they didn't know that I was friends with Sam, and they were saying like, yeah, I hear about this guy a lot, but I don't know if he's good because all I see online is crowd work. And I was like, no, he's amazing.
Yeah, he's unbelievable.
But they just don't want to post. He doesn't post his stuff because he's doing special. I don't care. Like, I'm just like, at this point, it's like, yeah, you'll see a bit. And then if you see it in the special, you saw it twice.
Yeah. And like I said,
people want to see, like I used to go see George Carlin all the time. I wanted to see bits that I had seen.
Oh, you want to see the hits.
Yeah.
You want to hear the new stuff, obviously, but you want to hear the hits.
But I also want to hear the hits. Absolutely.
Yeah. And like I said, Sam Morril is one of them. There are so many comics that are amazing at crowd work. He's an example. There's a lot of examples. Like I said, the issue is now.
But his material is better than his crowd work.
Material, exactly. And I've tried brilliant. And obviously I'm not on his or your level where I have specials on TV or something, but I've recently tried to get over the burning material thing just because they say you got to post a lot of clips. So I've compiled like 70-ish clips that I want to post for the next 6 months. And I'm just trying to tell myself, like, you're not burning material. It's not like everyone in the world is going to see this clip. People aren't going to see me at a show and be like, I saw a clip of this joke 7 months ago.
Right. Fuck this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had somebody come up to me after a show, like, the weird, because of social media, everyone's a critic. Is like, really great show. I heard a couple things last time.
Oh, God. Yeah.
And
yeah. It's like, that's,
yeah, I saw you here before.
Yeah.
You're also repeating.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, I feel like there's a fine line. You have to keep writing, and obviously it depends on what level you're at and how well known your stuff is. But you also have to have an act. Like you don't have to have a new hour every 2 weeks.
No, it's people don't understand things. Something Woody Allen said that actually was not ridiculous. An hour of stand-up is the creative equivalent of a novel, and it really is. It's like you put as much into a tight hour as a writer would put into a novel.
100%.
It takes a year of full-time work to get a tight hour. And really Carlin is the person that sort of established this sort of work schedule or career path. You do an hour, you record it, and you start your next hour.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. I just recorded a special, and then I was like, okay, well, that hour's to bed. Now I have to write a new hour. And I just thought, well, I will live my life and things will happen and I will talk about them. So it will be fine. And then my dad called and said, your mother died. I'm like, I didn't need material that badly. Yeah. I was thinking maybe I'll buy a new car.
Yeah.
Maybe the dog will.
Yeah. I could have talked about traffic.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah. The dog might do something. But thank God I have that chunk.
Yeah.
I don't think that people are so averse to hearing things that people like stuff. They absolutely want to hear new stuff, but it's not like if people it's like when you go to a band, you want to hear the songs you like.
And I think one thing, because stand-up has risen in popularity so much over the past few years.
So much.
And I think one upside of that is a lot of fans who just aren't comics, they're kind of in tune to how stand-up works because they listen to, podcasts, they listen to Marin or, comedy podcasts. So they come to see you. They know they'll hear old jokes, new jokes, stuff you're trying for the first time. Like people are very in tune with that right now for the most part.
Because you get these people, like you look at Bert Kreischer, like at Richard Pryor's peak, he was not selling out venues that size.
Yeah.
Goldthwait just opened for Adam Sandler at a 18,000 seat venue. The last performer in that venue was The Who.
Yeah. And
it's just like Pryor and Carlin never performed to that many people. I think Steve Martin was playing 2,000 seat arenas and thought it was too big.
Well, not only that, it's interesting, like in the mid 2000s when Dane Cook was selling out stadiums, he was the only comic on the planet selling out stadiums. And it felt like this is the peak of, this will never happen again. This is it. Now there's like 50 comics that sell out stadiums.
Crazy.
Like it's very cool to see. I like it, but it's interesting that it's rose from like, we'll never see this. I remember seeing, I know comics hate him, but in 2007, I saw Dane Cook at the United Center in Chicago, and it just felt like I'll never see a comedy show in a stadium again. This is unreal. Since then, I've gone to like 5 more in the past 10 years.
Are there laughs? Or is it that, because Marin called it, it's more like a rally.
It's interesting. And the laughs, they sound different. So when everyone laughs in a stadium, they're laughing, but it doesn't sound like laughter. It's just this wave of noise.
Yeah. And I can't imagine that, like, for the performer, because I've worked big venues just on a show that was big. And there's like the 3-second delay on everything. It's like you get a joke, the laugh reaches you because it goes up. It takes them a beat to hear it. Then they respond. That response goes up and then is bounced back to you off the rafters. So
And it's an interesting dynamic because I feel like the vibe of a show at a stadium, I saw Mulaney at the Forum, I think like 2 years ago. Amazing show, but the vibe of the show, it doesn't feel like a comedy show. It feels like a concert. Everyone has a hot dog and a beer and they're whispering to each other during. And I realize I do not envy the opening acts at a stadium show for comedy because everyone is just chatting and like filing in slowly. Like the openers were fucking hilarious, but no one was paying a lick of attention to them.
Yeah.
It sucks to do comedy in a bar and no one's paying attention. Imagine do a comedy for 20,000 people and they're not paying attention.
Yeah. I mean, to me, the best place to do comedy is this is not where I've certainly worked in these venues, but the Lenny Bruce era, like when it was like a jazz club, like you're in a basement, there's a low ceiling. It's like 150 to 200 people at tables, all crowded together. Everybody's in suits. That was to me, that's like the ideal laboratory for stand-up comedy.
It feels intimate, but very official. It feels very professional. Like we're all here for a show. But we're hanging out. We have suits and cocktails. So like this is real, but we're having a good time and just fucking around.
Places like the Cellar in New York, like, that to me is like where comedy belongs, in the basement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a weird room.
Dark, low ceiling.
That's really what you want. I remember I was with a friend of mine, Mike Carano, really, really funny guy. He was not a comedian, but he worked for the Improv and management. And we were going into, I think it was the Brea Improv. We were just driving around in the area and he stopped in for something. And he's talking to the manager, and the manager's like, we're going to put in all those rooms, as Drake Sather used to say, you can't see the back of the room because of the curvature of the earth. And the guy was like, we're going to get a chandelier in here. And he's like, why? Why are you giving anyone anything to look at other than what's on stage?
Yeah.
It's just this weird attitude of everything. It has to be the bigger and the bigger, the better. Like, no.
Yeah. You don't want distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's a Vegas kind of belief that I guess is, it's like, I like the idea of like seeing a big show.
Yeah.
It's a really, so where are you? Are you touring? What are you?
So I have a show at the Improv that it's called Salty AF. It's in the lab. I'm tinkering with the idea of making another special in the near future. Kadi Assad, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Her and I have been co-headlining on the road a lot, and we're going to keep
doing that. Great. That's a great show. That's a great show.
And we're going to Seattle in October, I think, and Minnesota in November. And
what venues are you forwalling, or are you going to like Acme and Helium and stuff?
I have it written down somewhere. I honestly forget the names of the clubs. Let me see.
You will need to know those.
Yeah. But yeah, just kind of figuring out road dates with Kadi Assad, who's one of my favorite comics, tinkering with the idea of a new special. And just, it's been about a year-ish, a little more since I put out this special, but I still am. But
the album came out pretty recently.
The album just came out recently, and I was excited because it's an excuse to promote it again. Because I like this special. I've been wanting to push it as much as I can.
Didn't it premiere at number one?
On iTunes, yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
That could mean, only like 5 people use iTunes, so it might not be that. Yeah.
Are you, are you getting played on Sirius?
They said they'd let me know, Comedy Dynamics. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I will get played on Sirius just because you've seen the special. A lot of the bits don't work out of context of the full special.
Yes,
if you just hear one of the bits in the middle while you're driving to work, like, why is this guy talking about a kid getting crushed by an elevator? Like, this is supposed to be funny. Yeah.
You have besmirched the name of Raw Dog Comedy. You have sir, you have brought calumny down on the good name of Raw Dog Comedy.
Yeah.
Have you seen a Bert Kreischer show?
I haven't. I've seen bits and pieces of his stuff. I think he's super funny. I've
seen
a
he's
lot
super
of his
funny.
Stuff. I saw him at I watched the Tom Brady roast on Netflix,
Right.
and he was funny on everything I've
And
seen.
he had a shirt on, right? He kept the shirt on the whole time.
Yeah, he did. Everything I've seen.
It would be terrible if he had to take a shirt off in every situation.
Yeah. What I've seen is funny. I don't know a lot of his stuff, but he seems very funny.
No, I'm just I've known him forever, and he's a super great guy. And then just to see something just go explode like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, and people say, you're jealous. No, it's
just fascinating.
Yeah,
And
I would be jealous if he was doing my act. But
Yeah.
But other than that, I have no connection to it whatsoever.
I'm picturing a shirtless Bert Kreischer in a stadium talking about your mom dying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's referring to her as my mom. So then Dana Gould's mom died. Again, with the fake mic.
Yeah, well, you have a real mic.
Well, where can people find you online as they want to investigate?
Yeah, so my Instagram is Mr. Drew Landry, and my TikTok
is it spelled or MR?
Oh, MR.
Okay.
Drew Landry, and my TikTok is just Drew Landry, and the special's on YouTube. The album is on Apple Music, Spotify, anything else.
Great, and it's called All My Friends Are Dead.
All My Friends Are Dead, yeah.
The hilarious All My Friends Are Dead.
Yes, there's an air about hot coffee that's hard to resist. Full-bodied, refreshing hot coffee makes any time a pleasant interlude. Won't you have some now?
It's coming. Here it comes. It's intermission time. Time to visit our concession stand.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Playboy magazine began in 1953 in Chicago, Illinois, the brainchild of a University of Illinois psychology graduate named Hugh Hefner. Now, by the 1960s, Playboy magazine had become an American publishing and pop cultural institution, combining the cheesecake photography of men's magazines like Stag and Wink and Gent with nods towards serious literature, serious journalism, real commentary. Imagine the New Yorker with a naked lady in the middle. Imitation being the highest form of flattery, the imitations came fast and furious. That said, Playboy didn't feel any real competitive heat until a magazine called Penthouse hit the stands. Penthouse was the brainchild of a guy named Bob Guccione, born Robert Charles Joseph Edward Sabatini Guccione. His driver's license was 2 feet long. He was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1930. He grew up in New Jersey, decided to become a priest, decided against it, and got married at 18. Had a daughter, got divorced, went to Europe to become an artist, got married again, had 4 more kids. Guccione and his new family moved to London, where he took on a number of odd jobs. I would think so, with a family that size. Among them was a mail-order business that sold back issues of old men's magazines, like the aforementioned Wink, Stag, and Gent. Now that business lost money, times were tough, Guccione's second wife left him, took the kids. Inspired by the success of Playboy magazine, Guccione founded Penthouse magazine, which was basically Playboy, but more so. The articles were more transgressive, the photos were more explicit. He created a promotional brochure for the magazine and sent it out to the wrong mailing list. Or did he? According to an article on Guccione in the New York Times, the brochure, which included samples of the nothing left to the imagination photography style that would become Penthouse's trademark, was sent to, and I quote, clergymen, schoolgirls, old age pensioners, and the wives of members of parliament. That stunt, intentional or accidental, did not go over well. Or did it? You see, although the fine for sending indecent material through the mail was a little under £300, the resulting outrage generated enough publicity to assure that the entire first printing of Penthouse magazine sold out. Now this was 1965. 4 years later, in September of 1969, Penthouse magazine hit the stands in the United States. It was a huge success, and Bob Guccione, now on wife number 3, was well on his way to becoming a very, very rich man. Now, he was larger than life to begin with. If you had to cast someone to play a 1970s adult magazine publisher, and the guy came out of the wardrobe trailer dressed like Bob Guccione, you might send them back with, gee guys, it's a little on the nose, don't you think? Guccione, in his heyday in the 70s and 80s, when he was in his 40s and 50s, was fond of leather pants, gold chains, satin shirts open to his belly button. He was the Italian stallion long before Sylvester Stallone showed up. And as Penthouse magazine grew in popularity, Guccione became very rich. He branched out into collecting art, fine photography. As a company, Penthouse invested in several high-profile motion pictures, including films like The Longest Yard and Chinatown. But Guccione didn't just want to invest in other people's movies, he wanted to produce his own. And not just any movie. He wanted to make a mainstream, blockbuster movie that broke the boundaries of what was then considered acceptable for sex on screen. He landed on an epic, the story of the Roman Emperor Caligula. The real-life Caligula ascended to the throne at the ripe old age of 24, and by all accounts, he was wholly unprepared for the responsibility. He was popular at first, doing what he could for the people of Rome, building them racetracks and theaters, holding free gladiatorial matches, repairing the roads, repairing the ports. But such was the structure of the Roman government at the time that he did have to deal with the Senate, and he did not like this. Early on in his reign, he suffered a serious illness. It may have been a nervous breakdown, it may have been epilepsy, but whatever it was, he emerged from it a wildly irrational and unpredictable tyrant. Now, it may very well be that he was always a wildly irrational and unpredictable tyrant, and that his illness just exacerbated his psychological descent. We don't know. But we do know this. For lack of a better term, the Emperor Caligula declared war on the Roman Senate. He had senators executed if he felt threatened by them. He made his horse a senator. Some say he made his horse a priest. Why argue? He did declare himself God, and purportedly liked to make out with his sister. Eventually, he was murdered by his own guards. The end. Now, there's a story there to be sure, and Guccione began shopping it to writers. First up was the German art house darling Lena Wertmüller, but her script was rejected, and he gave the property to novelist Gore Vidal. Lena Wertmüller, Gore Vidal, Bob Guccione's Caligula was shaping up to be a prestige project. He offered the film to John Huston to direct. Huston passed. Federico Fellini and Nicholas Ray were considered, but eventually the directorial reins fell into the hands of Tinto Brass, who had just made a film called Salon Kitty, which was based on the Truth is Stranger Than Fiction account of a World War II story, where the Nazi SS took over one of Berlin's most popular brothels, replaced the prostitutes with female SS agents, there's a promotion you don't want, and began cataloging the pillow talk of the German High Command. But it was exactly what Guccione was looking for, a prestige film with sex that was intrinsic to the story and all over the screen. With a script by Gore Vidal, a hot art house director, and a producer with bottomless pockets, Caligula attracted a lot of big-name talent. Malcolm McDowell, the star of Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, was signed to play the lead. Peter O'Toole, Sir John Gielgud, and a young Helen Mirren all came on board for what looked like a highbrow examination of how power corrupts. The film intended to show the decadence of ancient Rome as an allegory for the decadence of modern Western civilization. The problem started, immediately. Peter O'Toole, who, by all accounts, was never not fabulously drunk on set, did not get along well with director Tinto Brass. Neither did screenwriter Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal also didn't get along with Bob Guccione, and that got Gore Vidal banned from production. The sets, on the other hand, whether Gore Vidal could see them or not, were amazing. Federico Fellini's production designer Danilo Donati was handed a blank check and said, "Recreate ancient Rome." And so he did. Tinto Brass filled the screen with sex, but it was dark, angry, depraved sex. In other words, it was the sex as described in the script, used to illustrate the point of the story that power corrupts and that corruption infects everything. Unfortunately, that's not the kind of sex Bob Guccione wanted, even though it was what was written in the script. Bob Guccione wanted sexy sex. He wanted the screen to be filled with high-paid actors and beautiful, lavish, expensive sets, but more than anything else, he wanted sexual sexiness, and he wanted it administered by sexy hot chicks. Tinto Brass cast local Italian actresses who looked like regular people, which was historically accurate and cost-effective, as they were in Italy and normal Italian actresses were in high supply. But Bob Guccione published Penthouse magazine, and he wanted the women to look like the models in Penthouse magazine. So he flew them out from California. The problem was the director didn't want them. He was making a film about ancient Rome with a cast of Shakespearean-trained British stage actors, and these girls looked like they had just walked out of, well, Penthouse, which they had. Bob Guccione had a problem. His director was shooting the script, but it wasn't the movie he wanted. He'd flown a bunch of hot chicks in to have hot sex on screen, but the director was cold to the notion. The budget was already through the roof, and firing director Tinto Brass was out of the question. So, Bob Guccione happened upon a solution that was as audacious in its simplicity as it was completely fucking bananas. Director Tinto Brass spent his days shooting the film Caligula, with the script and the cast that had all been previously agreed upon. At the end of the day, they would all go home. And then Bob Guccione would come in on the same sets, and the same costumes, with a bunch of penthouse pets and local sweaty fuck dudes, and film them having super raunchy porn sex and super gross violence. Guccione would take the film that he shot and make sure that Brass never saw it. And the director continued to work on the film, completely unaware that the other half of the film was being shot while he slept. When the films wrapped, Guccione took all the footage into the editing room and locked the director out. An article on the making of the film on the website Cine Outsider, which was one of the major sources for this piece, by someone named Slarek, I assume that's his blogger handle, and that he's not a Vulcan, pointed out that, oh yeah, Bob Guccione had never edited a film before. Oh well, no worries. Bob Guccione made sure that his hardcore material featured in almost every scene, whether it belonged there or not. It was basically really, really hardcore pornography and hardcore torture porn. And occasionally, some really famous actors would have scenes, almost as if they'd mixed up the reels of this movie with another real movie that was playing somewhere else in the Cineplex. The final cut of the film saw Tinto Brass's director credit reduced to Director of Principal Photography, Gore Vidal wanted his name off the movie. The real actors in the film, Malcolm McDowell and company, refused to discuss the film, much less promote it. The film got an X rating, which meant it could not be advertised nationally and could only be shown in porn theaters. Now, this movie cost about $73 million in today money, and it could not survive with that kind of distribution. So Guccione went back and cut an R-rated version. The people didn't like that one either. In fact, they hated it. Variety called it a moral holocaust. Here are some excerpts from Roger Ebert's review. Caligula is sickening, utterly worthless, shameful trash. If it is not the worst film I have ever seen, that makes it all the more shameful. People with talent allowed themselves to participate in this travesty. Disgusted and unspeakably depressed, I walked out of the film after 2 hours of its 170-minute length. That was on Saturday night, as a line of hundreds of people stretched down Lincoln Avenue, waiting to pay $7.50 apiece to become eyewitness to shame. I wanted to tell them. What did I want to tell them? What I'm telling you now. That this film is not only garbage on an artistic level, but that it is also garbage on the crude and base level, where it no doubt hopes to find its audience. Now, it should be noted that Roger Ebert was no prude. He wrote Russ Meyer's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. This movie shook him so badly that his review ended with a sad comment on human nature itself. To quote Roger Ebert, "The human being is a most curious animal. Surely people know going in that Caligula is worthless. Surely they know that there are other movies in town that are infinitely better. Yet here they are at Caligula. It is very sad. My friendly recommendation is that they see The Great Santini to freshen their minds and learn to laugh and care again in a movie. People learn fast. This movie," said the lady in front of me at the drinking fountain, "is the worst piece of shit I have ever seen." Now, of course, Caligula did make its money back and it went away, but it was never forgotten, secure in its status of so bad they're good cult legends, even though it's not really good. Bob Guccione passed away in 2010 from lung cancer. And then, last year, in 2023, an editor named Thomas Nagovin decided to completely recut the film, taking the 96 hours of original footage and sifting through it to see whether or not there really was a movie in there. What emerged was Caligula, the ultimate cut. More than anything, Nagovin tried to rescue Malcolm McDowell's performance, to unearth the arc of this character, to somehow put Caligula into the movie Caligula. There's something moving about Nagovin's quest to honor McDowell's performance. There's not much the recut can do about the script and the iffy camera work, which are all part of its charm, but Nagovin has unearthed, at the very least, Caligula's character arc, taking him from a young man kneeling before Peter O'Toole's Emperor Tiberius, knowing full well that Tiberius is mad as a hatter, to a new, bright-eyed Roman emperor, and then his own slow disintegration into madness. Madness caused by the corruption of power. Is Caligula the ultimate cut better? It couldn't be worse. But you can only work with the film you've been given. An article in The Guardian by Catherine Bray on Nagovin's version sums up the issue better than I ever could. Caligula's strengths, the elaborate sets, particularly the head-chopping machine, the OTT costumes, the beautiful way that it is lit, are still present and correct, as are the multiple orgies, the infamous fisting scene, the copious nudity, and the genuine shock of some of the violence. At the con premiere of the new version, there were some walkouts. These followed the scene where Caligula rapes both bride and bridegroom at a wedding. anyone expecting a purely silly cult movie may be surprised at how dark and upsetting some of it is. And always has been.
They spoke of it first in whispers. Then it took the media by storm.
I have existed from the morning of the world, and I shall exist until the last star falls from the heavens. Although I have taken the form of Caius Caligula, I am a god.
Bob Guccione and Penthouse Films International present Caligula.
No, kids. You can't watch it.
Symbols. We're all familiar with them. There are shortcuts to vital information. That's why, to familiarize you with the movie rating symbols which will be used by this theater, we present the following guide for parents and young people. It is designed to inform parents about the suitability of movie content for viewing by their children. G, all ages admitted, general audiences. GP, all ages admitted, parental guidance suggested. R, restricted, under 17 requires accompanying parent or adult guardian. X, no one under 17 admitted.
And now, on with the show.
It's a sun-dappled day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in sunny Southern California. Everyone knows, probably everyone who is listening to this podcast knows about the Criterion Collection, which is a high-end film restoration and preservation outfit that is, although they have a channel, they concentrate a lot on physical media, owning a DVD, owning a Blu-ray, taking films that are of value and restoring them and preserving them. It's an important part of our cultural heritage. What you may not know about is a company called the Vinegar Syndrome, which I call the Criterion Collection for the drive-in. Basically, I'll let the pros explain it. I'm joined today by two people from the Vinegar Syndrome, one of the archivists and chief preservationists. And Dino, what is your gig there? What's your position there?
I'm not really sure. I work in the archive. I work in not the film archive, the store, the archive, and just kind of keep my hands busy with all kinds of behind the scenes miscellany.
Okay. So it's Oscar Becher and Dino Proserpio. I did it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. This is very cool to be here. And thank you for the German pronunciation as well. Much appreciated. Yeah.
My wife is Swedish, so I've spent a lot of time in that neck of the woods. We went to our honeymoon. We went to Berlin for our honeymoon.
I went to school in Berlin, so I knew it well.
Oh yeah, it's an amazing city. It's an amazing city. Well, Oscar, how did when you think of a film archivist, you imagine an old graybeard Scorsese type. You're a young dude. How did you get into film preservation, and why a company like Vinegar Syndrome and not the Criterion Collection? For example, just so you know, whereas the Criterion Collection will, we're talking about the Criterion Collection will preserve and archive the films of Werner Herzog and all of those great stuff. Vinegar Syndrome has just released a box set that we're going to talk about called The Lost Picture Show. And the films featured in it are films like The Las Vegas Strangler, The Last American Hobos, Voodoo Heartbeat, Red Midnight. How did you get into preserving the Al Adamson level film work?
Yes. So first off, thank you very much for having us. And thank you for saying that I'm young. I just turned 30, so I don't feel like I'm young anymore. But
who, Oscar?
Yeah. So with how I got into film preservation, it's I don't know, it's very tricky. My father was a film preservationist. And my grandfather, so I was forced into it. I kind of just came into it because I loved watching movies, and I got obsessed with really good looking movies. And I kept noticing that the studio films, when they were released through these like Universal or MGM, they always look a little bit better than some of the other stuff that I'd come across. And the early stuff, which is mostly like public domain or in archives, nonprofits. So I got kind of closer to it by basically attempting to find out what sources things were taken from, and eventually found my way to what I like to call is like the Hogwarts for film nerds, which is basically just the Selznick School of Film Preservation, which is in Rochester, where Kodak was situated. And they basically just threw us into the deep end, and we had to learn how to not fuck up films.
Okay, right.
So
the name Vinegar Syndrome is specific to the smell of decaying nitrate. Is that correct?
Close. It's the smell of decaying triacetate, which nitrate is pre-1950s. In Russia, it can go into the late 50s. But like 60s, anything that you know from the 60s, 70s, 80s, that's going to be on cellulose triacetate, which is, I'm not going to go into chemistry, but I do want to.
I can see it in your eyes.
I must. There's it's a whole complex process, but in order to make celluloid plastic, they use specific types of chemicals. When those chemicals decay, it smells a crazy amount like vinegar. And it's very pungent, very acidic. If it can knock out your sense of smell for like a week if you open up a can and just are too eager and stick your nose in the film can.
Wow,
so that's where we kind of came from. Yeah. So that's where we came from. And that's what we have to smell all the time by having to work here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there is a way to save and clean up films that are beginning to decay, and I'll give an example of why I think, just for my own dumb layman's view, we talked on this podcast about the Ormonds, and we had Jimmy McDonough on to talk about his book, The Exotic Ones, and the Blu-ray package equivalent. And one of their films, I forget which one it was, they shot in New Orleans. And I believe 1969, and they weren't permitted, and they're just running and gunning around New Orleans. But that shows you New Orleans in 1969, and you see it's, despite the story of the film, it's living history. It's like, this is what it looked like. This is what it was like to be in New Orleans in 1969. I imagine Red Midnight, which I've yet to see, which is in your box set, will show you what it's like to be on Cape Cod in probably the same year, 1969, 1970, in Cape Cod in New England in that amount of time. And it's a view to the past. It's so vital and so important. And you also get which Criterion doesn't serve, although their work is so incredibly important, independent filmmakers from that period of time, and drive-in culture. How did Vinegar Syndrome choose that? Why do they shop in that store? Why did they go down to that way? From what I understand, it was originally to preserve old X-rated films.
Well, yes, we don't draw too many distinctions between feature films, pornographic or otherwise. And we definitely started with an exploitation angle. Like you said, Criterion really covers a lot of the more art house and higher budget, higher ticket.
And Janus Films and that stuff.
Yeah. Janus being Janus is their theatrical releasing arm. Whereas we were looking at independent films and exploitation, genre films is really the best way to call it, to refer to them at this point, and just not looking at any lines, not differentiating between pornography or independent film. It was all worthwhile independent film. And we started really looking at interesting exploitation and actually sexploitation filmmakers who were kind of lapsing into dramas early on. And then eventually expanded into more exploitation titles, more genre film titles, and then further and further into horror. But at this point, the company's put out over 500 movies, licensing from Universal, MGM, etc. We put out movies from the 40s to the early 2000s, pretty much true to our name, Vinegar Syndrome, focusing on celluloid or whatever Oscar's chemical combination is. We pretty much look at any form of movie as being valid, especially the stuff that tends to be overlooked, things that fall through the gaps. If it was made on film, it matters to us.
We should just say the film Vinegar Syndrome was founded in 2012 by two guys, Joe Rubin and Ryan Emerson. And it is interesting because when you go to the starting in the late 50s, I guess, what we think of as X-rated films, it's not adult content as people know it today. There was an attempt at dramaturgy. And it's easy to see how how a filmmaker would evolve into telling a better story and telling a story. A popular example would be Glen or Glenda, which was not an X-rated film, but independent film made by Ed Wood. Although we know now it was his attempt to tell the story of his cross-dressing and dysmorphia, whatever you want to call it. Then distributors padded it out with striptease numbers, weird S&M, Irving Klaw footage. And at the time it was released, it was just simple exploitation. Then it became an object of kind of mocking derision. Now, I was talking to Scott Alexander and Larry Karaszewski about this the other day, who wrote Ed Wood, the film. Glen or Glenda is not funny anymore. You can't laugh at Glen or Glenda now. And it's much more of it's a much more important cultural artifact than people give it credit. And also for 1952, 1954, a very naked, honest representation of a subgroup and a plea for tolerance that was incredibly rare for that era.
And one of our early releases was, we're kind of always trying to bridge the gaps, because there's a lot of, especially with genre films, genre film people, my particular hang up is always horror film people. A lot of them, especially people focused on slashers. So they're surprised that for people who you think would be attracted to outsider movies, they can be surprisingly narrow and rule-based. One of our earliest releases was the Lost Films, which are kind of goofy sexploitation movies of Herschel Gordon Lewis. Right. So there's always that point where we're trying to push a little bit further beyond like the lines of, well, I like horror, but I don't like smut. To your point, Glen or Glenda is a perfect example. I think you have a copy now of Take It Out in Trade.
I do.
Which is an Ed Wood movie from 1970, much to the same point, and maybe actually I would argue much more progressive than Glen or Glenda. It not only shows Ed in cross-dressing regalia, dressed his natural state at that point. It shows a surprising number of what are shown to the audience as normal relationships, lesbian, gay, etc. It just as being completely normal. But just like you said, it's always those commercial forces of show business. That movie is padded with an enormous amount of nudity for some reason, female nudity, where someone clearly said, well, we have to make this sellable for a 1970 audience. And in traditional Ed Wood fashion, he had no idea what was bankable at that period of time.
Right. Well, he was an auteur. He was telling his story, and you're welcome to come along. A film that's worthy of preservation, that needs to be restored, but there are elements of it that are missing. One of the first ones that Vinegar Syndrome did was a 1984 film called New York Ninja. But when you got it, it wasn't fully, you had to kind of finish the film. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So basically, well, I personally wasn't the one. All credit to that one goes to one of our film restoration artists, Curtis, who's also a filmmaker. We have people from a wide variety of different backgrounds here, and he found all these roles for film cans, just random film cans. They're essentially dailies, where they were titled New York Ninja, a title that didn't appear anywhere on the internet. There's no information about it. All we knew is that every single piece of film that was ever shot for this mid-1980s movie was here by John Liu, a very famous martial arts star who's known for his very high kicks. But
like the Rockettes. He's the
exactly.
Rockettes of martial arts.
The Rockettes of Hong Kong. Yeah, exactly. But essentially, it was so much film. It was thousands of feet of film, and no one knew what to do with it. Obviously, we are a restoration company, so the different people have different expertises. There's a restoration section, an archive section, a shipping section, business.
Right.
And
there was no audio.
There was no film production section. So essentially, because of the fact that it was just negative, and the fact that there was audio shot, there was on-set audio shot, but it was lost. It probably sound materials go bad incredibly quickly, probably thrown out in the 90s or something like that. But essentially, Curtis had to piece together this actual film, try to construct the narrative. We were looking for a script, anything. Couldn't find anything, and then had to re-record every single piece of dialogue. And in that case, it was such
so did you have the script, or did you have to...
Well, he wrote
figure
one,
out
I believe.
Okay, but did you know what the dialogue was, or were you lip reading and recreating?
So in this case, there was I think there was talks about going to a lip reader, but in the end, Curtis actually learned how to lip read because he was watching the footage so closely. So he was able to come up with such a tighter, better script that actually followed the narrative.
Amazing.
It's insane. And essentially what ended up happening is someone ended up who was doing extras for the release when we finally were able to put it out. They found the script. And the funny part about it was the script almost matches perfectly Curtis's script. So that just is props to him and his skill level, because that's learning straight from the bottom. You have to figure out how to piece together a movie just by what you have.
But again, for people that don't know, that only know New York from the 2000s forward, New York in 1984 was a completely different animal.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I remember being in New York in 1984, and Times Square was dangerous. It wasn't like downtown Disneyland. It was it's a radically
no M&M
different place.
factory.
It's a radically different place. And the culture of the grindhouse cinemas that were popular in New York at that time, and that's something that Vinegar Syndrome serves really well. Is before in the world before streaming, when it was just TV, and TV had 7 channels, the movies were, and especially now when we're at a time when the future of cinemas as physical structures is called into question because of media companies fucking it to death. That people would go to the movies much more often, and there were different strata of movies. There was drive-in movies, there was grindhouse movies, and then there was mainstream movies, and all of these things needed product. So you had an entire world of filmmakers, your Ormonds, your Al Adamsons, your Herschel Gordon Lewises, that were just pumping out product to fill these theaters. Do you see an equivalent for that today? Where do you see that filmmaking today?
I'm going to ask the young guy. I figured out a way to live in the 20th century as long as possible. So I don't know. Good point.
To that point, I mean, I think it's kind of coming with regards to bringing that exploitation ground up, a single person pushing it forward mindset. I think I do think a lot of the boutique labels like us, I do count us in with that. Vinegar, Severin, Arrow. A lot of these companies are just run by really passionate people who are the truth of the matter is, it's about minimizing cost and creating a product. But our cost here is truly, we have a film archive in-house, so we never have to pay for shipping when we need to go from another archive, or we don't have to pay someone to scan something unless it's a studio title. But I don't know, there are a lot of like equivalences. I think podcasting too is like a modern method of doing that. Do it yourself. It's odd and counterintuitive because everything used to be on film, right? So you'd have to have a lot of film, and now it's digital, and it seems like there's a slight bit less of like a do-it-yourself mentality in filmmaking.
In terms of distribution, I mean, we all know this, but the democratization of all this has just created a flood of way too much stuff, and it's harder and harder to get it out there. But of course, creativity is still there, just, still fighting against everything else to make its way to the public.
Yeah. And with the increasing corporatization of film companies and film product, it is the nature of grass to grow through the sidewalk. I know you'll always get independent voices, independent films, and it's just trying to find a way to get them to the public. There'll always be that sort of DIY impulse to tell a different story. So I talk about it now because it's an interesting time, because to live in Los Angeles, which is purportedly the film capital of the United States, and it has so few actual movie theaters anymore. We went to see Furiosa, which you would think would be a packed, we went to the Chinese theater, and, the day after opening day, and there's 6 people in the auditorium because it's already streaming, because people know, well, I'll just wait and watch it for free in 3 weeks. And the same company that does that, the same company that says it's in theaters on this day and it's on your TV for free 14 days later, doesn't understand why people don't go to see it in the theater.
That's created some really weird phenomena from my perspective. I was a host for Alamo Drafthouse for 5 years, and just what I got to learn about exhibition, the business of exhibition. My roots are in the music industry. My roots are in like music promotion, and I work with records primarily. But looking at all the options people have and how to consume movies at this point, it's a maddening process. And to make it even weirder, what Oscar just said in terms of this constellation of boutique labels, there's now also this issue where, yes, we are trying to save movie theaters, we are trying to save theatrical exhibition, but you also have these purists, and some of these people are like 25 years old, developing a purist mentality where they think anything but a 35 millimeter print, regardless of how good the quality is, they won't go see a movie in a theater unless it's a 35 millimeter print. In many cases, those prints are true grindhouse, quote unquote, prints.
Right.
They're destroyed. They're in bad shape, etc. But Joe Rubin, one of our founders here, he refers to this as the print cult. It's amazing to think about, like, there's so many options for movies at this point, and to try to second guess them in terms of a commercial sense. Maybe the best thing we have is what we do here. This was not meant to be a promotional turnaround on that phrase, but maybe the best thing we have is the packaging, the new packaging of older movies, what we do, what other companies do, to get it out to either subscribers or people who buy them from us, because there's so many weird options. Like just like you said, sometimes a brand new movie should have a good following in the theater, and sometimes doesn't.
To talk about Furiosa as an example, Mad Max Fury Road, one of the reasons it was so popular, and one of the reasons that the films that any film you will see with that Vinegar Syndrome puts out, what you see on screen is what happened. And there's no digital magic in terms of creating things that aren't there. You might restore the picture, but you're not creating things that aren't there. And Fury Road was a very, very, very practical effect movie. There was cleanup and whatever, but
it's physical. Yeah. It's about physical. That physicality.
Yeah. And your eye will know. And Furiosa looked less physical, and audiences didn't respond, which is one of the things that is interesting about another thing that is so great about the films that you guys work with and distribute is what you see is what happened. And I'm only speaking for myself, but I can always tell when there's CGI, and it pulls me away. It pulls me away.
Well, similarly, off that topic too, I think there's been much more of like a reliance recently, or more of an emphasis on what AI is going to do, what digital software, I know, where it's just like you can tell if something has been touched by AI. Like people have reacted to photos looking differently on their phone. But if you are actually caring about these movies, you want to see them exactly how the filmmakers intended them to be seen. So, even with us, our overhead is basically we have 3 restoration people working round the clock. They get through 1 reel a day, pretty much 20 minutes of film a day, to make sure that they remove only scratches, only dust, and nothing else gets messed up. And it's because we really do care about the film as an actual material. It's that materiality side of it where we don't want to add anything that wasn't there. We don't want to, with regards to like the practical effects, you can see so much more of the actual way a film was shot and conceived if you can actually look and see the actual film.
Yeah.
There's always going to be guesswork in digital.
And you'll see people online go like, look, this commercial was made completely by Prong or whatever the name of the program is. Like no actors or nobody was involved. Like that's not good. Who are you? Why are you happy about this? Well, it's just like, I understand that I, as I always say, you have to remember half the country went to war because they thought it was a good idea to own someone. It's like, you always have to remember people look at the world differently than you do. But what's good about that? We've taken artists out of it completely. Great. You suck. Congratulations.
I think what is great about that. I'm between your age and Oscar's age, and I feel very fortunate to have been able to get involved, like I said, in working in theatrical. I presented movies, I hosted movies at an Alamo Drafthouse.
I hope you did it in the guise of a character like Count Proserpio or something. I certainly hope there was a slash-like top hat involved.
Let's see. I once wore a rabbit outfit to host Mallrats on Easter.
Sure.
And I played it as, I actually insisted on drinking with the outfit on, and I played it because it was at night. I played it as this just seemed logical to me. I played it as a completely fed up, foul-mouthed rabbit who was tired of working all day Easter. So I may have made blasphemous jokes.
I'm in full support.
Most of the time, honestly, I approached movies like texts, I have something of an academic background, sort of. I approached movies in the sense of like, we should respect these because, because I'm not a MST3K fan. We should respect these because these movies are valuable regardless of what people tell you about them. But I say that because I had to learn how to look at movies through the lens of someone younger than me. Like I always think about like a 20-something or a 30-something, like when they're seeing movies that aren't completely CGI, aren't AI, what have you, like, they're seeing something that they'd have to find. It doesn't reflect the majority of the commercial mainstream product that they grew up with. And some of those people, like being able to, and it takes work, obviously, being able to be open-minded enough to understand, hey, those people are going to show me something about those movies I can't see. Is part of the reason why, like, one of our biggest sellers here is a movie that I remember seeing in the theaters in the 90s, and I remember how many people hated Showgirls, and it has been completely reclaimed. It is a totally different movie, and we put it out in like a deluxe package, and it's still one of our biggest sellers.
Of course. How did you guys get Showgirls?
We have licensing deals. There's movies that we own. There's movies that we like.
But there's a majority. But it's like I don't equate like Showgirls with The Last American Hobos. Like you went, no, we're going for Showgirls.
Well, at this point, and part of the reason that the Lost Film Show, the Lost Picture Show, is a 10-year kind of a 10-year celebration for us. It's because we've grown so much at this point,
right?
And yeah, that we have sub labels like Vinegar Syndrome, Ultra, whereby we do something like Showgirls or
sure.
Cloak and Dagger. We did Beastmaster. Just really nice 4K packages, but we have all the genre film stuff, slashers and what have you in our main line. We have separate lines for different things. We put out Little Darlings on disc for the first time, which has been lost, for a long time in a separate line, in a separate imprint that we have.
As I said, I was talking to Larry and Scott the other day. One of the things that O.J. Simpson did after his acquittal was he got into a disguise and went to the Beverly Center to see Showgirls because he couldn't wait. Yeah. And, we were just, my wife and I just threw something on last night. We watched Fight Club last night. And, the interesting thing about Fight Club is that's a time capsule. That's 1999 or 2000 or whatever year that came out. Like, yep, that's very, very specific to an era that is now historic, and to an attitude and an era. And the interesting thing about Fight Club that you can see now is with, the ascent of like the sort of the Joe Rogan of it all. No one got the joke. People never got the joke. The right has adopted snowflake as a derogatory term for people that are empathetic. Snowflake comes from the book Fight Club, which was written by a gay gentleman as a parody of macho culture. It's like they never get the joke. Showgirls is I think a good example of people not getting that it was a joke. If you look at Starship Troopers, what Verhoeven's trying to do. If you look at any film that he's done, clearly, I think at its inception, it was a parody of America's arrested adolescence in terms of its attitude towards sex. It's a very juvenile American. I don't think everybody in the film got it. I'm sure the studio didn't get it. I think the film is famous, if nothing else, for the most aggressive and violent eating of French fries on film. It is an example of people didn't get the joke. And I think like Glenn or Glenda, time is going to be kind to it. You were talking about Dino. You were talking about a younger person's attitude towards film. My oldest daughter, who turns 22 today.
Oh, congratulations!
Yeah,
happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Lou. She took a film class in high school, and she had to watch some. Because it's very hard to get kids to watch older stuff. I loved it. I don't know why. My favorite movie when I was growing up was The Wolfman, which was made 25 years before I was born, but it's hard to get kids to watch things that aren't brand spanking new. And it was interesting to see her attitude towards a lot of films. Her review of The Godfather was, they could have told this story in a half an hour.
Oh. Yikes.
But John,
that would have been a movie.
I'm sure they would have loved to have cut it. I'm sure Robert Evans would have tried to do it. But watching Jaws with her was really interesting, because the first time she saw the shark, she went, "That is so fake." But by the end of the movie, she was screaming, "Stab it in the He stabbed it in the eye. Like he got her, and she was caught. So it's fascinating to see people get, you can get sucked in by a good story. It's all a good story. Oddly, the only black and white film they completely fell into was Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
That must have made you happy, though.
It was great. And I was just stunned to see them laugh. I have 3 kids and they were howling at it, which it was just like, it was great. And we talked about, as I said earlier, when you see these films, it shows you an America, and by and large America, that is gone. So much of the disease of our culture is people, dealing with their insecurity by wanting to return to a past that never existed. And America has been it's like a book in its chapters, and it's always been a drastically different culture. I don't think any of us would understand America in 1950. I think you because what you think of, there was so much other stuff going on that would leave you completely freaked out. I don't know if any of you have seen Bike Riders yet.
I haven't. Yeah.
The really amazing thing about Bike Riders is they capture how people talked and they spoke differently. It's really, really well done in that regard. But the dispossessed, which is now, every city now, because of our economic inequality, has a homeless issue, houseless issue. There used to be hobos, which was a completely different. It was the different version of the same thing. And in one, there's a film in the box set that you've released, The Lost Picture Show, made by a guy named Titus Moody. Mm-hmm. I swear I've heard that name before in a historical context.
He's got all these different creds within exploitation film, and I think he usually wasn't a director, and sometimes appears as Titus Moede, Moede, like his German name. I think he worked in all different. He's one of those everyman of genre film, independent film of like the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, to me, I hear Titus Moody. I think, he was something in the Civil War.
Oh, okay. So, yeah.
But it sounds like somebody else. But he has a film called The Last of the American Hobos. Oscar, tell us a little bit about what people will see when they watch The Last of the American Hobos.
Last of the American Hobos is a 1970, I believe it's 1970. It's a semi-documentary. So it's kind of pseudo-doc, but it has narrative elements, and it has these very strange...
Like Leonard Glenda, not unlike Leonard Glenda.
Yes, very much like it, except it seems like he had this obsession over the course of many years with hobo culture. It's essentially like a response to The Vanishing of the American Hobo, that very famous article.
Right. And the dying art of cooling pies on a windowsill.
Yes, exactly.
You can't leave pies out anymore.
Yeah, handkerchief on a stick. Yeah, and
it's called a bindle. It's called a bindle.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Dana. I was just
I'm 30, so I don't know.
we used to have a thing on. I worked on The Simpsons, and we used to have a thing in scripts that whenever we would reference hobo, it would have to say in parentheticals, with bindle.
Right.
And if God help the script supervisor if they left out with bindle, because it would be called on the carpet.
Nice.
Yeah. But yeah, essentially it's like it is the stereotypical view of that hobo culture where you have the 5 o'clock shadow. And,
sure.
And basically it's every single hobo song in the hobo songbook is probably referenced, if not played, during this movie.
Right.
And the movie had become lost for very many years. Very episodic, a half home movie too. And the only way to get it would be to actually write Titus, and you'd say, the typical way apparently that people would get the film out from him is it would say, "I've always wanted to see this movie. It's on a list here," and then he would send you a nice letter back with a VHS copy of it.
Wow!
And that's the only way that this actually entered circulation. And that actually came through Bob Murawski at Grindhouse. And the original elements, completely vinegared. It's completely, it's almost like a pool of nothing.
Right.
But all we had was a print. Yeah, it's just soup, like sticky soup that just smells like vinaigrette. And he still has that original element, but the only surviving print we have here. So at this point, I think it was one of the most overlooked films on the actual set because of the fact that it wasn't exactly exploitation. There's nudity in it. I guarantee you that.
Thank God.
But
hobo nudity. That would be
right.
The film contains smoking, harsh language, hobo nudity.
Mm-hmm. It's an idea for a future box set, the hobo nudity anthology.
I'd watch it.
I would like to be. I would like to be involved in the curating of that.
But I think that one is a really special one. It also has a line which I'm going to butcher again. It says, "I wish that everyone in this world could be hobos because it's such a great way to be."
Well, hobos,
so earnest.
Hobos seemed happy with their lot. One thing that I know from my own interest in hobo culture is that there was a code, a visual code that they would write on, like if you were kind to a hobo, somewhere prior to your house on a tree or a post would be a code that would say the house up ahead is friendly, they will feed you, but it would be in a weird code that you wouldn't know what it was if you looked at it.
Yeah, hobo marks. Sometimes it would be a mean dog lives here, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. And again, you get to see in the Last American Hobo, as somebody who lives in Los Angeles now, you get to see a lot of old LA. Which is I cannot get enough of. I could watch that stuff all day. There's stuff you'll see on YouTube of just like a drive down Sunset Boulevard in 1966. And it's just somebody had an 8mm camera. They stuck it out of the front of their car or the back of their car and they drove down Sunset. And I can watch that stuff all day. It is just fascinating to me. Another city that is so drastically different in to use 1969, 1970 is the change in Las Vegas, which brings us to the Sex Serum of Dr. Blake, also known as Voodoo Heartbeat. When you hear voodoo in a title, you don't think, well, clearly this movie is set in Vegas. Right. But Voodoo Heartbeat was made by Charles Louis Nizet. Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yeah, Charles. I say Nizet because I always imagine that an American would want the T pronounced. But that one's very cool. So that had two different versions. That had a very classic way of becoming lost, where essentially they cut an original version and then recut it for an international audience. So currently, what we have on that set is the Sex Serum of Dr. Blake. But there is a horror cut, which is still lost to this day. The only thing that we have, the only footage that we have, was actually sent to us a few months back by someone who was a Vinegar Syndrome subscriber, I believe. He purchased our stuff and he bought it off eBay. He saw it and then he scanned it, paid for scanning, and then wrote to us directly and said, "Do you want this? I think it should be in the archive." So we have this beautiful symbiosis of people like actually being archivists themselves, which is very important. But that's a very wild one. Lots of blood sucking, lots of like eternal youth.
It's amazing. Cool the poster for it, there's a booklet that comes with the box set, and there's an article, there's a piece written by a guy named Stephen Thrower. My apologies if I mispronounced his name. The poster for Voodoo Heartbeat reads, "Warning. Be sure you are mature enough to witness the shocking details of this motion picture." And the review that, or the piece that Stephen Thrower writes, includes this following passage that I'm going to read. Thanks to this unexpected Blu-ray release from Vinegar Syndrome, we can finally see what lies behind one of the most mysterious titles in U.S. exploitation. It appears to be the original cut, with bloody limb lopping, gory heart removal, lots of pre-hardcore female nudity, a lingering full frontal shot of the portly Will Long, and glimpses of testicles during a nude threesome. Enjoy!
Now you see why I work here.
Yeah.
I get it. And again, it's so much of exploitation is glancing up against hardcore, but not hardcore. But to that end, there's a film called What's Love, which is literally the tagline for the film was very erotic, very artistic, but not a porno.
Yeah. That one, yeah. That one's very cool.
It's what's amazing about What's Love is it stars a guy named Bill Cable, and I want you to tell us a little bit about Bill Cable, but it's filmed over 3 different periods. You get to see this guy age in this movie. It's fantastic. Tell us a little bit about What's Love, which is also in the box set.
Well, I feel like you'd know about Bill Cable more than...
Well, I just know that we did put out I can't speak too much on What's Love, but I could tell you that Bill Cable does appear on Pee-wee's Playhouse, if I'm not mistaken, later in his career. But we did put out by the same director, Carlos.
He's in Basic. He's in Basic Instinct.
Everything.
Okay, there you go.
He plays. If you see the film Basic Instinct, he plays Johnny Boz.
Yeah. So yeah, I have to look for him in that, but I do know him from a hardcore release by Carlos Tobalina. We ended up with most of the movies that Tobalina made, and he had a whole empire. He owned, I think it was the Aztec Theater in LA. Yeah. And he owned a whole chain of theaters. So he was making so much money with his theaters. He just said, now I'm a director. And he started making movies.
You can do that.
Some of which are laughably bad. And so, he made one that's like a porno film that's at least 180 minutes long, like preposterously, like interminable almost. But he made one called Jungle Blue. And I believe Bill Cable is the lead in that. But if I'm not mistaken, there's inserts of John Holmes. So I don't think Mr.
Interesting
Cable,
choice of words.
Well, I'm this close to a bad joke about the word cable, but anyway.
I was doing insert, but you go ahead.
Good man.
Oddly,
on What's Love?
Speaking of John Holmes, you might not know this. You go out that window right behind me, and you go down the hill about 40 seconds. You're at the scene of the Wonderland murders.
Oh, wow. Jeez.
Yeah, it's right down the street. And I had Lou Wagner on my podcast, on this podcast, who played Lucius in the original Planet of the Apes. And he lived down there during the Wonderland. He goes, I just woke up and the street was full of cop cars. It's just like, I love these historic events. It's just a pain in the ass to get out of the street.
Wow. Yeah. Well, the thing about the Lost Picture Show is that the whole concept was to take 10 movies that either people had never heard of, didn't even know existed, or didn't even believe existed, like the final Albert Zugsmith movie, Violated.
Right.
And cobbled together from our different sources, and the fact that we have so much material here, and with allied entities that we work with, to put together 10 movies. Good, bad, inexplicable, or downright enraging, and just put them all together as a set.
Violated, which I believe at one point had the not great title, The Rapist.
It's gonna sell well. Yeah.
Good change. Good change. Sometimes notes are good. When something is so fascinating to me, I always say, oh my God, it's like porn. It's like, I can't get, it's like, it's so fascinating to me. Just the characters. There's a movie in here called Beware the Black Widow, which was made by a guy named Larry Crane, who had a great title, All Women Are Bad.
Yeah.
But like a lot of guys, how did he start in the business? As a puppeteer.
Naturally.
Yeah. It's just like all these guys, or the Ormonds, or Al Adamson, or the ghastly one.
Andy Milligan.
Andy Milligan. And they're so American. These stories are so American. All of these people just making something out of nothing, you know?
Absolutely. But Beware the Black Widow was the title that I knew that Larry Karaszewski had fixated on from his childhood. And I couldn't help myself where I started communicating with him directly during the progress of like scanning the movie, and I got to see it.
That's hilarious.
This and that. I couldn't help myself because he was, and he seemed genuinely, it was just, through the direct messaging. He seemed genuinely not just excited, but like grateful. By the way, you mentioned Violated. We did an in-store with Frank Henenlotter, and I'm the token, or one of the, pretty much the token New Yorker here. I drive to Bridgeport from where I live in the suburbs of Westchester County. So they said, would you do this? Okay, fine. I actually chauffeured Frank Henenlotter. I spent the whole day driving. I drove into the city, picked him up, brought him up here for an in-store, then drove him back. So we had these great conversations where like Frank, the director of Frankenhooker, and I are having like a really in-depth conversation while I'm driving him about like the best Billy Wilder movies, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, but all these guys know. Yeah.
And he's somebody who was excited for for this film set. And I engaged him on this. And one of the things that really stuck with me, he's a bit opinionated guy. So that's another story, but brilliant as well. And really, really passionate about the movies he cares about. He said, "Hey, did you notice in the beginning of Violated, Eugene Roche is in it?" And I said, I love Eugene Roche. What are you talking about? He's not in that movie. Here's the thing. They stole a shot on a sidewalk, I believe, in Hollywood.
And he just happened to be walking by.
Eugene Roche, resplendent in a pair of bright red pants, seems to have just left a record store. He's got like a record in a carryout bag. He's on the sidewalk. He looks up. The main character is like a woman to his left that we're supposed to be focused on. He clearly looks up, notices there's a camera on him, and then very casually walks out of frame. So he's in the beginning of Violated. And of all people, Frank Henenlotter is the one. I noticed this stuff. It was amazing.
Yeah, and Violated, which was made by Albert Zugsmith. Albert Zugsmith was a real guy. He made Touch of Evil. He made I have a poster of the Beat Generation up in my home.
If you look behind us, you'll see one of his movies, which is still lost to this day, I believe. Movie Star American Style. But we really like Zugsmith. We try to champion him here. I feel like it's been Violated was kind of the last real one that.
But we did put out his version of Fanny Hill that Russ Meyer made.
Right. Russ Meyer's most boring film.
Yes, pretty much. But we put it out in the world.
What I find interesting about films like What's Love and even Showgirls is a great analogy, is a great other example, is so much of exploitation glances up against hardcore, but isn't hardcore. It's always about sex, but they're always trying to thread the needle, no pun intended, with it's mainstream, but it's sexual, and it's going to, and that's what What's Love is trying to do. And I do believe it was sincere in its attempt. Showgirls was supposed to be the first big mainstream NC-17 film. It was supposed to be like, we're going to be able to show you sex and tell a real story, and we can't do it because we're in America, not France. The title that should be included with Showgirls, and it's a film I'm wondering what your guys talk about, is Caligula. Like, that's sort of a forgotten cul-de-sac of that type of cinema.
And it's actually, I forgot, I think Umbrella in Australia, easy. Another company is putting out like a jumbo package of it right now.
Oh,
I haven't
approached
it, but I certainly have strong memories of purloined Penthouse magazines from the 70s. The actual spread, you might have seen that.
I saw it. I'm exactly where you are. I never saw the film. I do remember the Penthouse. It was a girl on the cover with a horse behind her.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. your joke here. But it started with McDowell. Like, it was a real, and I think some other big names are in it. And
Helen Mirren, I think, said, I don't care what you say about this movie. It bought me a house.
Yeah. Well, that was Michael Caine's comment on Jaws: The Revenge. I've never seen the movie, but I saw the house it bought.
Love that. Yeah.
I mean, I think going off of that example, it's very funny that you brought it up, because I that is a good example. I think because currently what they're showcasing is the ultimate cut, which is essentially made of outtakes, and they re-edited outtakes. So famously, there's no original shot from the original film in it, in that version that they're showing. Wow. But it's the ultimate cut, and people seem to respond very kindly to it, which is good. But the truth of the matter is, the OCN is still lost, and that
what is the OCN?
Oh, sorry. The original camera negative is still lost.
Oh, it's lost. It's lost.
No one knows where it is. We think we may know where it is. But the truth of the matter is, there's so many enormous titles, so many important titles, which are, at least for going against the rating systems and changing the actual structure and landscape of film history, which people aren't fighting for. And the easiest method oftentimes is to, I guess the easiest method in this case was to find the outtakes, find a lesser generational element, put it out. This is nothing against them. But the truth of the matter is, film preservation is about bringing people closer to how things were originally screened theatrically. That's the ideal. It's the goal. And we want to see things, how people reacted to them, whether positively or negatively, so that now people can kind of take what happened then and be able to bring things, and whether or not it's bad or good, we want people to make their own opinions. I think that's something which is super, super important, especially with Caligula, which my dad also introduced. He told me I should see Caligula because I was watching movies, and he's like, you should watch. Here's where I should state.
You've seen it.
Yeah, easily seen it. Here's where I should state that Oscar is comes from a family of artists. So that wasn't entirely obvious.
Yeah.
But just the idea of Caligula and how much of a phenomenon it was, and whatever, you keep going back to this, say maybe decade of porno chic, from 72 to maybe 82, when these things kind of happen. There's two factors, I figure. First of all, I mean, at this point in time, we can look back at all vintage stuff, pornography or not, and it's now quaint compared to whatever the modern day of that is today. But also, the amazing thing for me, and part of why I love what we do, because we do pornography, we do sexploitation, we do everything in between, is just that these things are still cultural factors that complicate and upset people and arouse people at times. They're still just as valid as they were in that period of time in some ways, because we still can't really, like you said, we're the United States. We still can't really deal or confront so much of sexuality. There's this whole, the two sides of Hollywood, the porn side and the non-porn side.
And it is like magic, where once you it's like Showgirls is a great example of we're gonna show you everything, but it's all about the thing that we can't show you, but you're gonna get as close to that thing as possible in a respectful way. But all you need to do to see that other thing is look at this other thing where it's completely available, but it's not interesting. It's like, then you get to the thing, is okay. It's like, it is like magic. It's like the magic, it's better to have all the magic. Someone once said, the magic should stay in the hat. It's about what you can't see.
I was just going to say, it goes back to the old, I think it's probably from the 40 Thieves of Exploitation, the old guys who did this. It's the old dictum. It's, you sell the sizzle, not the steak. It's still that old line. It's nothing changes.
Yeah. And as always in culture, the people who are loudly and publicly against it are actually the people who have the biggest collections.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
It's great.
The hypocrisy of humans and sexuality is never going away.
Yeah, and as you know, it's like we as the Chinese curse says, we live in interesting times, and at a time when we're being dragged back culturally and being equipped with technology that we're not emotionally equipped to deal with. It's like, let's give these chimps flamethrowers and see what happens.
Right.
It's probably not going to be great.
But the nice thing, to go back to something you said, the nice thing is that you can still show humans, you can still show to people elements of humanity that they'll react to. Like CGI and AI, it's there and it's maybe good for something, but for people, even if they're young people who didn't grow up with, some of this stuff from the 50s and 60s, they can still look at something and they can see human flaws and identify with it and immediately feel like there's something there for them.
Where can people access the products and the Vinegar Syndrome? How can people enter the world of Vinegar Syndrome, and what do they have to look forward to?
It's all at vinegarsyndrome.com. We're available at, social media just at Vinegar Syndrome, spelled normally. We have, vinegarsyndrome.com for regular, releases, and Melusine, MELUSINE.com for hardcore and sexploitation. They have to be two separate sites for logistics reasons.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It really comes down to a completely, again, we're talking about sexuality, hypocrisy, our culture,
sure,
etc.
Yeah.
It really comes down to payment processing. There's a payment processing schedule for what is considered high risk payments, which is gambling, probably when it gets figured out, marijuana payments and so forth, and anything that touches pornography.
Oh, okay,
so,
that makes sense.
Whereas people, you could say, oh, it's a moralistic thing. It's like, it's higher than us. It's payment processing.
We're trying to showcase more of our a lot more of our films and being more regular with adding trailers to weird shit that you never thought that you'd actually really like.
Right.
So definitely, if whatever you're viewing this on, definitely check out the YouTube channel, because there's some wild stuff.
Oh, that's terrific. It's Vinegar Syndrome.
It's Vinegar
as
Syndrome
a YouTube
on
channel.
YouTube. But also
Right.
I go through, every once in a while, educational things, showcasing different elements. So that may be helpful to people who would also be interested in learning more about film preservation if you care about such things.
Once in a while, I get to participate in these videos, including the time I got to be credited on screen as Jello thrower. But I do an obscure movie podcast called I Eat Movies as well. And
terrific! I Eat Movies.
I did just attempt to do some justice to the 1967 Casino Royale.
Oscar Becher and Dino Proserpio. Vinegarsyndrome.com, Vinegar Syndrome, the YouTube channel. Definitely pick up the Lost Picture Show DVD box set and avail yourself of the podcast I Eat Movies. To be continued.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould bound.
We barely
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out. You want me? Peace out. Boom.